Wow, I'm a little bit disappointed because I just recorded Just Jenny episode 4 and there was no sound even after doing a sound check, so that kind of sucks. But anyways, I'm Jenni Lee from Block 5 Studio, and I just want to welcome you to episode 4 of Just Jenni Lee, where I talk about the inspiration that goes into my paintings. Somebody had asked me, what inspired you to even make that painting? And I thought it would be fun to get into it, so let's get into it. So anyways, I'm working on the line work in this, and my goal is to work on that while I tell you a little bit about the inspiration behind why I paint what I paint and, you know, what guides my path here as an artist. So the first thing I want to tell you actually is the main inspiration behind this painting, or one of the main inspirations behind the actual subject matter versus the actual concept behind it, is my husband is a big F1 racing fan. Before we came back to our faith, my husband and I used to watch the F1 races like every Sunday morning. That was kind of his tradition in life. So I joined in, and I actually thought they were a lot of fun. I had a lot of NASCAR fans in my life growing up, and I thought F1 was actually kind of superior. So for all you NASCAR fans out there, sorry about that. Yeah, so I like to make paintings in honor of people to nod to certain things. It's like a little hidden Easter egg inside my artwork that, looking at the subject matter, you might not really understand who it's for, why it's for, what is the point of it. So that's really the first part. So the color palette. Well, you know, I don't want to make anybody super triggered, but my traditional idea of like boyish colors, you know, greens and blues and such, but I wanted like the idea that this is vehicular, right? So I wanted it to feel almost gasoline-y. And so I kind of went with this like really sickeningly like yellowy yellow all the way to these darker purple values, so that it would remind you maybe a little bit of like the slick on gasoline. Yes, it usually will have like reds and stuff in it too, but this is kind of what I was thinking of, like the idea of gasoline, you know? My synesthesia will help me to like pair colors with certain things, and this is just what my brain kind of sees when I think about gasoline. And the other motivation behind it is I oftentimes use the Bible and my faith actually as like a hidden Easter egg of meaning in the paintings that I create. So I'm going to tell you about this one, and then I'll pick up my marker and I'll tell you a little bit about the previous large-scale acrylic painting that I did for my daughter. It wasn't really for her, but it's like in honor of her. So back when I was going through all those divorces and all that chaos and the surgeries and all that sort of thing, I was really struggling to get out of my situation, and I have a dear artist friend of mine named Pat, and she would just tell me constantly, like she would text me almost every day saying, eye on the prize, eye on the prize, eye on the prize. And this is really when, after I left the church and when I was, you know, with these kind of other kind of crazy people. And so when I came back to the faith, I realized she was kind of like speaking prophetically, right? Because in Philippians 3, verse 14, it says, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Wow, I was like blown away at the idea that somehow that was actually like a scripturally sound piece of advice. And so with panic attacks, with anxiety disorders, it can be really hard to press on. There are just times that I don't want to get out of bed. So it can be a real struggle. And I love having like big, large scale visual reminders to myself about where I've been, how much I've overcome, what I'm capable of if I really put my heart and mind into it. So that is kind of the reason for the subject matter, the color palette, and kind of the concept behind it. A lot of times my artwork will be like 3-tiered between the color palette, the image or the subject matter, and the concept behind it. So I take images and I like to flatten them down because I'm really blind. I can only see up close. When you see me working, I'll take my glasses off because in reality, I can only see up close. And with my glasses on, my vision is only somewhat improved. It's not even like 20/20 vision. So sometimes the world really looks in these like fuzzy ways to me, and I love to put these black lines on there and then take this, what starts to feel three-dimensional image, and like flatten it again, because my world without my glasses on is really flat and all I can kind of see is colors and I can't tell any distance at all. So some of it has to also do with my vision and how I struggle just to get by in the world, not being able to see anything that's not really past, you know, that's past the end of my nose basically. The last large scale painting that I did is called "Oh Taste and See." And if you're familiar with Psalm 34:8, you'll know the verse that says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." That was another thing I really, really needed to remind myself, because it became very easy once I had left the church and went through the divorce and everything to forget those things. I decided to just completely go in the opposite direction, pursue science, you know, be an atheist, say this isn't real, because I had been in the church from the time I was 5 until I was about 35, and there was no break. I had never even had a sip of alcohol until I was in my 30s, and I remember having a drink of alcohol for the first time. It was like a pina colada or something. People were like, "Oh, it's coconut and it's, you know, pineapple and you really like it." And so I was like, "Yeah, this is pretty good, but like that weird aftertaste at the end, why not, like, what is that?" And they're like, "Oh, that's the rum, you know, that's the alcohol." And I was like, "Yeah, it would be better without it." But obviously you get used to it and then you want the rum, right? And so I had prided myself that I had never really even sworn in my lifetime. I was just such a pious, devoted, devout person, really until my 30s. But then people started to recognize that I was really smart in school and that I was a talented artist. And they started to question my faith and even my motherhood and all that sort of thing. So the last painting that I created is called "Oh Taste and See." And the subject matter was chosen because back, I don't know, 8 years ago or so, the first year that William and I were dating, we took Naomi up to Martha's Dandy Cream, which is in Lake George, and they're the best ice cream ever. We love them so much. They're like 45 minutes from our house, and we will drive there at least once a week just to go get their amazing ice cream. The peanut butter soft serve is the best. But anyways, we had taken her for ice cream, and she had held up her ice cream cone in front of their like very iconic, and it is iconic, sign that has like the 3 neon ice cream cones, and she put her hand up, and so I took a picture. It almost looks like the Statue of Liberty holding up a cone, and it's just her hand and the cone and then the like neon sign behind it. So the inspiration for the painting was when I took that picture, I was like, oh my gosh, I love that so much. That would be fun to paint. So over time, I kind of mulled over it when I thought, well, I'm going to do another large-scale acrylic painting, but I'm not going to base it on anxiety, and I'm going to base it on something else, like joyful. All of my paintings up to that point, when they were this big and they were the acrylic, they were all based on very like anxious points in my life. I have like ones with like hiding behind their hands. I have one with like this. I'm worried I'm knocking my microphone. So I had several that I had done that were like anxiety related. So my husband was so thrilled when I said, hey, I think I'm going to focus on painting more like, I don't know, joyful or fun, uplifting subject matter. He was like, oh yes, I'm so excited for you to do that. So the ice cream cone was perfect, and the color palette that I picked out for it, well, my daughter's gone through like many phases in her life. As a very little girl though, you know, the times that are so near and dear as a mom, she was really into pink and purple, like every little girl princess is, right? Over time, she shifted, and in middle school, it was teals, and then in high school, it went back to like pink, but a very pale, soft pink with like whites and maybe creams. And now that she is off on her own, her palette, it tends to be a lot more muted with like just whites and taupe and, you know, cream colors. But anyways, those first years, she was really, really into pinks and purples. So that was going to be my color palette. So the piece kind of ranges though from like bright yellow green into oranges, into pinks, and into purples. So I decided that what I would do is I would take the concept of the neon lights that were behind the ice cream cone and those bright neon colors, and I would use those colors as the cone and the hand and make them really like pop. And then the more muted purpley dusky colors I would put behind the cone, and the cone and the sign would sort of like swap roles. And it's a pretty interesting composition. You really can't tell what it is unless you're kind of led there. I think I've had one person know what it is. So when you're looking at it, you're kind of like, it hangs behind my keyboard in my music room, and it's big. It's 4 feet tall by 3 feet wide. And so you can see it in all its glory every time you come over. We have musical Mondays, and people will come over, and if they haven't seen it before, I'll be like, all right, can you guess? And they're like, I don't know. So I go through the whole thing of telling them the story of the ice cream cone, the color swap, and the scripture sort of behind it. And then they're like, oh. So I like to take things that are also a little bit unexpected. It's like one of those, I don't know, if you grew up in the 90s, 80s, 90s, they had all these books where you could like open up the pages and you had to like really stare at the picture and the image would like pop out at you. It's not quite like that, but it's also a nod to my childhood because we would love to stand in the mall and just open those books up and see if we could like see the image, make our eyes like do the thing where the image would pop forward. So it's not as challenging as that. You can definitely see it, but it almost has that feel. So there's a lot of like little hidden Easter eggs in the artwork that I create. And you could look at it though, even not knowing that, and still appreciate what you're looking at. Back in the day, when I was going to school for art, we did a lot of different field trips and museum trips. At one point when I was down in South Carolina going to Converse College, I was able to take a 2-week trip with a class up to New York City, and we just literally all day long from 9 in the morning until 5 at night, we were just pounding this pavement at every museum, big famous ones like the Met and the Guggenheim, down to smaller ones and less recognized ones. We went and saw all kinds of installations. They have like schools down there that were converted into art spaces. And we were there for 2 weeks, and then we would like go to see Broadway shows in the evening. It was so much fun. I had the time of my life. That was in my early 20s. But interestingly, that really impacted my world. It really helped me to see artwork differently and understand that I could convey an idea behind what I was doing and not just a representational image. Now, I'm not dissing anybody who does representational paintings. Like, that's fine. Bob Ross obviously had a market, you know. Thomas Kincaid, he's gotten famous for kind of repeatedly painting the same image, you know, over and over again in various ways over the years. And I'm not criticizing that. I think that's wonderful. But I would get bored with that. You know, like I said, I got the ADHD and the on the spectrum and all that stuff. So it just doesn't really appeal to me to do production work. I need artwork that like says something, because I was just around it for so many years that I'm not really interested in things that don't have some kind of meaning behind them. So I've gotten to the point in my life making art for this many years where like it'll be multi-layered and you kind of got to know a little bit about me to know about the painting. However, I really wanted to be able to gain the respect of artists and non-artists alike. So if you didn't know anything about my painting and you weren't an artist, you could still look at it and be like, whoa, that's really cool. Because a lot of modern conceptual abstract art, people don't get. They're like, what am I even looking at? Why did somebody paint that? Or why did they make this pile of crap on the floor? And I'm supposed to think that's a sculpture. I'm sure you've seen museums or art, you know, pieces of artwork where, you know, there's like a piece of tape on the wall and it's selling for $1 million. So I wanted my artwork to actually be relatable to people who weren't artists, but I also wanted it to command attention of actual artists. So it made me have to think about what I was making and make it in such a clever way, I guess, or thoughtful way that both artists and non-artists alike would appreciate it. one thing I learned in that 2-week time span in New York City, especially when you're like on a time frame, we were like, okay, we're only going to be at the Met for this many hours, or the Guggenheim, and this is what you got to see everything, and you got to absorb it, and then we're going to talk about it later, and da 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 da. So I realized something. When you're in a museum, or when you're in a gallery or whatever, artwork gets looked at as fast as 1 second at a time. You walk by, you look at the next one, you walk by, you look at the next one. And I thought, I want to make art that makes someone just be like, stop. If I can make you stop longer than just walking by it, then I've entered you in a dialogue. So my whole goal with my artwork is to like bridge the gap between, you know, artists and non-artists and be like in the middle. And the other thing is, the first time around that I really was focused on art before I went off and started studying psychology and all that stuff, I would say my art and my faith were pretty separate. I would say they lived in 2 separate boxes in my head, and they didn't really overlap. A lot of my work was very representational at that time. People really responded to my watercolor flower paintings, and they loved that. And my classes would get sold out teaching watercolors. And so, you know, I just didn't think that there was really a way to include, that one got kind of fat. I didn't think there was really a way to reasonably include my faith into my artwork, because the only artwork I'd ever seen that was really faith-based was like highly representational. You know, you see Jesus standing in a boat calming the waves, or you see him holding the hand of a child, or a lamb around his shoulders, and I'm like, oh gosh, I can't do it. I don't care to. Like, I can't. I will feel sick. I just can't. And it's not that I don't love Jesus. I do. But I didn't want to create that kind of painting. I just didn't. It's been done. It's been done. It's been done. And when something's been done so many times, like, I just don't, it's not interesting to me. It's nice, but it's also like what we think of as, you know, maybe representational of what Jesus looks like. And we don't know what he looks like. And a lot of times I think he gets represented in a way that is kind of alienating to certain people. So that just wasn't my heart. And so when I finally decided to come back after, you know, leaving the church and studying science and the scientific process and doing really well at all that, I decided if I was going to make art, then I needed to find a way to incorporate all of me into it and not try to keep them separate, because it just, I don't have that ability. But I didn't want to make, like I said, the representational, traditional artwork that everyone else was making. And so I decided that I would focus on Christian conceptual art. And there may only be a couple of us in the universe, but that is what I am. And I guess we're kind of a unicorn of creatures. But I think that there should be more of it. I think, you know, people assume, oh, well, if you're a Christian, that your artwork has to like look Christian. You know, I think that your heart behind it speaks more to what you're doing than what picture you have. I don't personally need to make pictures that people feel the need to hang in their living room that look nice over their couch. That's just not me. You know, I might be more successful if it was, to be honest with you. I honestly, I would say those people probably have a degree of success that I may never achieve, because I'm a very unique type of content, you know. But I feel like this is the way that I can be the most authentic. And I'm not stuck in like one modality either. For me, working in only one medium, in one style, in one subject matter would just get really boring really fast. So I work in pastels, and I work in watercolors, and I work in all kinds of mediums, because I really need to keep my creative energy going at all times, and stagnation is just not where it's at for me. So what I've really wanted to do with these little vlogs and with these little podcasts and all this, whatever you want to call them, these videos, is just share a little bit about myself and my process and my journey, and hope that I find other people like me or other people who would appreciate it. I do think there's like a lot of political commentators out in the world, And to be honest, I just don't feel wise enough to be one of them. I'm not sure I even know, that I know what I'm thinking. I'm just getting by day. And as you have learned now, I have changed my mind. And I'm not going to say I'll never change it again. I think that's a bold statement. So I'm just going to say this is where I'm at in my life right now. This is what I'm doing. And I just want to share it. I'm not trying to influence anybody into a particular idea. I'm just telling you where I'm at right now, and you might find that interesting. So yeah, I could do that, but the world is divided by things like politics, and it's united by artwork. And so I want to actually focus more on that and more on bringing peace, love, joy, gentleness, kindness, patience, self-control, faithfulness into the world than what the world is presenting us nowadays. Because I'm telling you, if I am flipping through YouTube, it can get kind of depressing. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in my journey right now. And I really appreciate you if you've made it this far in the video. I would love to have a comment from you. If you are an artist, you can drop me a little art emoji. If you're a Christian, you can drop me a little cross emoji. If you are a Christian conceptual artist, then drop me a unicorn emoji so that I know that I found another like-minded person. I would love to share our journey together and support you and your work. Definitely, if you want to have the notifications come when I do a post, a vlog, podcast, whatever I do, just hit that subscribe button, because I'd love to have you along for my journey. I hope you have a great day, and I will catch you in the next video.